But speaking of very talented players, I want to talk about Zion Williamson. Zion, one of the best prospects I've ever evaluated coming out of high school and in college. The most dominant college freshman I evaluated personally. I was not doing draft stuff when Anthony Davis was a prospect, so before you comment that, keep that in mind. And first few years of his career, it looked like he was that. Like, he missed most of his rookie year. He only played 24 out of 72 possible games. In those games, he averaged 22.4 points per game, and he shot over 61% at the rim on 13.3 attempts per game. And he barely took shots outside of the paint. He only took 1.7 shots outside of at the rim in his rookie year. Also, he did that in 27.8 minutes per game. Per 75 possessions, he averaged 27.7 points per game on 16.4 attempts per game at the rim as a rookie, and he shot 61.3% on those shots. And that's not even getting into the best of it yet, because his year two is one of the best age 20 seasons ever. 26.9 points per game, 65.4 true shooting percentage. He shot 64.7% at the rim on 14.6 attempts per game. What that tells me is this. Teams knew what Zion was going to do. In his second season at 20 years old, he's going to attack the paint. He barely takes shots outside of at the rim. In year two, he averaged just 2.5 shot attempts per game outside of at the rim. And they still couldn't stop him. He was a 3.6 in terms of his estimated offensive box score plus minus, which was in the 96th percentile. His EPM was at 3.4, 95th percentile. His estimated wins were 8.9, 95th percentile. So he was a super efficient, productive scorer, and his impact metrics were great. And every team knew, like, he can only, but like, I'm not gonna say it's like the only way he could score, because like he did flash like some floater stuff, like some semblance of a jumper, even if it isn't fully there. But like they knew, like, oh, he's attacking the paint almost every time, and they still couldn't stop him. Like, that's how special of a talent Zion is. Like, that's how dominant of a player he is. Misses year 3, comes back year 4, only plays in 29 of 82 games, but averages 26 points. His true shooting percentage goes up. Like, the rim numbers in terms of volume go slightly down from 14.6 to 13.2, but his efficiency at the rim goes up to 66.7%. It's a plus 2% increase in terms of his percentage. And even though I'm pretty sure he made the All-Star team that year, it's just that he missed a lot of time because of injuries, and that was really what became the trend. Like, he was dealing with injuries, and he had questions about his conditioning, and it really hit last season and at the start of this season. Last season was his worst season as a pro in terms of efficiency. Up to that point, at 61.6 true shooting percentage, his numbers in terms of like his impact, like career low 1.3 offensive estimated plus minus, which was in the 86th percentile. His estimated plus minus EPM was at 1.3, also a career low, and that put him in the 84th percentile. But despite that fact, he still was one of the most dominant rim scorers in the NBA. 63.6%, 12.1 attempts per game. Like, they still couldn't stop him in that area. The problem was like he was starting to take more shots outside of at the rim. Career high at the time, 3.3 shot attempts from non-rim 2-point areas of the court. He shot 34.6% from that area, and he shot 33% from three. But like it's not enough of a volume to really count that towards like impacting his efficiency. But still, like outside of Zion, probably not outside of Giannis, this was probably still the most dominant rim player in the NBA. Like top two, top three in terms of that. Had a great playoff game, but this season, like had that playing game. Like he goes off, and I think they beat the Lakers that year in the play-in if he is healthy. Like I do think that would have been the case. However, this season was off to a really bad start. First 4 games of the season, 18 points per game, 43.92 shooting percentage, 36.4% from the field. He barely plays in November, but he did look good. He averaged 31 in the 2 games he played and had a 66.7 shooting percentage. But, it wasn't good, to say the least, early on. With Zion, like, we were like, what's going on here? Like, to give a better picture of it, first 6 games, he's averaging, 22.7 points per game, and he's shooting below 50%, at 45% from the field. Like, that's well below the standard for him in particular. Like, it's below standard for most All-Stars, I would say, in terms of, like, the efficiency and production, let alone a player that, like, every time he's been on the court prior to this, is historically a dominant player. Then he misses like extended time. He plays his last game of 2024 is on November 6th against Cleveland. That's just a pretty good game. He has 29 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 9 for 18 from the field, and 11 for 13 from the line. However, he comes back on January 7th of 2025. Yes, that's the correct year. And since then, he's averaging 25 points per game on 59.7% from the field, 60.5% at within the arc. Yeah, 60.5% within the arc. And he's been playing, like, not just like and it's not just like the scoring numbers. He's also averaging like 7 rebounds per game and 5 assists per game. And I do think there's been regression with his athleticism. Like, it's not like he's a bad athlete now, but it is noticeable. Like, I think it speaks to how special of an athlete is. It's like, he went from 99th percentile athlete to like 97th percentile, which is still incredible. But I think this highlights what people don't appreciate enough about Zion and haven't appreciated enough about Zion as a basketball talent. And that's his skill and his feel for the game. I've always said this, dating back to like when he was a draft prospect. The athleticism is generational. Like the strength and the build and his ability to jump and run, it's all generational. What makes him, and I have no regret saying this, a generational basketball talent is the fact he has all those things on top of a really good handle, really good footwork, and really good feel as a playmaker. He's always been a high field passer, great vision. He understands his scoring gravity. He makes good reads. He can be creative as a passer. He always had his head up in transition. And again, the handle was always really good. He had footwork in the post. And I think that is being shown the most. Like, they have him running point guard a decent amount. Like he's the primary playmaker for the Pelicans. And I think the fact that he isn't like quite the athlete he was, even like a small step back as an athlete, that is enough for people to finally realize like, oh, he's really skilled and he's a really smart player. And I think that's what's made him last. Like, if he was just athleticism, he'd be out of the league by now. Like, that's just the truth of it. It's the fact that he is really smart. It's the fact that he is really skilled. That's what's kept him in the league. And even if the athleticism has dipped, the strength will never dip. Like, he's always going to be arguably the strongest player in the NBA. And when you combine, like, strength that, like, can outmuscle basically everyone with legit skill and legit feel, that can still make for an impact player. He has a 3.2 offensive box score plus minus this year, which is in the 96th percentile. And that's on a team that's one of the worst in the NBA. His EPM is in the 95th percentile. Again, on the one of the worst teams in the NBA. Like, I know like those numbers, like they need context, but when the context is he's really productive, relatively efficient for his standards, and his team's really bad, despite the fact that his impact numbers are really good, like 95 plus percentile good. That speaks to like how good he's been. And you know, nearly 25 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, and 5 assists per game. And that's with the context of him being like objectively awful for his standards at the start of the season. And, you know, we'll see how it goes from here. Like, he's always had moments of greatness. Because, again, he's a generational talent. He's truly one of the special talents we've seen in recent memory enter the NBA. And he always will show dominant moments because he's just that good. But I do hope like we're finally getting on track. We're finally, seeing a guy that takes his conditioning more seriously because he looks like he's in the best shape of his life right now. Like just watching him play. And yes, I did submit myself to Pelicans games to watch him play because I think he's that special and worth watching. But he does look like he's like in shape. He is still incredibly explosive and still like even though like I think like prior to like entering the NBA he was the best athlete in the NBA. Now I think he's like close to like the back half of the top 10. Part of that is guys that have entered the league. Part of that is his own regression, even if it isn't major. But I can't give up on him. I don't think I'll ever be able to give up on him. Like I understand like the concerns about his conditioning, concerns about the injuries, but I can't quit a talent like this. I can't quit a talent that puts up numbers that are historically great whenever he steps on a court. Somebody that the scouting report is clear. He attacks the paint almost all the time. That's his main source of offense, and nobody can do anything about it. I can't give up on a player like that, especially when it's only 24 years old, even with the injuries, even with the conditioning problems. I can't quit that. And I really hope like what he's showing this season is a sign of things to come. Because I think like if he never dealt with injuries and he was able to keep his conditioning in check, at this point, without like those two factors, he would be one of the 3 best players in the world right now. Like, I truly think he'd be that special. But game reps are important for long-term development, and he just hasn't quite gotten that consistently. And he's still an incredible player. Like I would still argue like he's a top 25 or 30 player in the league. And I hope he can keep it up because like if he can keep it up, and continue to stay in shape, and get himself healthier, and play a long time moving forward, get back to the 70 games he played last season. I make that a consistent thing. I think like he's gonna be a top 10 guy. Like he's a top 10. I would argue top 5 like pure talent. But like the injuries and the conditioning and the availability, like that matters. But if he's available, if he's in shape, there aren't 10 players in the world better than Zion Williamson.